Story 1. Premonitions. At the age of 20, my brother had been sick for at least a week with what we thought was the flu. This was around the time I left for college. Several days later, I hear from my parents that he's in the hospital and has survived a close call with a ruptured appendix. He had been to the doctor at least once, if not twice during this week, and the appendix issue had been missed. I was angry with my parents for years for not telling me what was transpiring, but I'm mature enough now to realize that they thought they were doing the best thing by not adding to my level of stress. Anyway, the next day, suddenly, without a shadow of doubt, I knew that my brother had passed away. I actually hid in a campus building where I knew no one would find me, so that I could spend a couple hours alone, crying, before I felt ready to face those who would be coming to fetch me and send me home. Which is exactly what happened. My boyfriend at the time had looked for me on another floor of that building, and, being unable to find me, was waiting for me at the bike rack outside of my dorm when I returned. My brother's death was totally unexpected. A pulmonary embolism, after walking the halls with his fiancée. They were to be married in 1 month. It was a tragedy all around. Another weird thing that I've only shared with my sister. About a month after my brother's death, I had a very vivid dream. On a bright, sunny day, with puffy white clouds in a crystal blue sky, I find myself walking down a street. Obviously, a new street, as only new construction is visible. Several houses are going up, and many busy construction workers are about. I hear the sounds of their talking and hammering as they're pounding nails into walls. As I pass the first house, my brother jumps down from an open first floor, where he is either working or supervising, and steps out to greet me. He motions to the house and tells me that he's building this house and that it's almost finished. I will come and live there with him. That's all I remember. It's the only dream I've ever had that I can remember more than a day or two after I had it. It makes me cry when I think about this dream and these memories. A few years ago, I finally shared the dream with my sister, who said that she had that exact same dream. I'm convinced and comforted by the thought that when it's my time to pass, my brother will be there to greet me on the other side. I'm sure that's what the dream meant. Story 2. Going home. When I was 13, my great-grandfather was in a nursing home, and I went to visit him. When it was time to go, I said, "I'll see you tomorrow, Papa. I love you." He replied, "Oh, I won't be here tomorrow. I'm going home tonight." I tried to reassure him that this was his new home, but he said, convinced, "No, I'm going home tonight." He passed away sometime in the middle of the night. I guess he did go home. I also believe that he spoke to me years later when I was 19 years old. I was traveling a curvy country road in January, and it was icy. It had melted for a few days, which made the road slushy. I was in a straightaway and heading for a curvy section when I heard, "You really need to slow down," in a very familiar voice. I heeded the warning and hit a 20-foot patch of ice at about 25 miles an hour. The State Patrol estimates that I accelerated to 55 plus miles an hour before hitting an embankment head on and flipping the car. It probably would have been a lot worse had I not heard that familiar voice saying that I needed to slow down. My daddy told his sister and brother-in-law that he was going to have all the family together for Halloween in October of 2003. He had been diagnosed with 2 different types of cancer a couple years before and had only been given a few months to live. On October 30th, a week after my sister came in from Maine, my dad took his last breath. I guess he had actually planned his death, so to speak. He only had his wife, children and their husbands, grandchildren, and a few close others by his side. Just the way he wanted. My mom is convinced that Daddy kicked her in the shin, causing her to have a blood clot the year after he died. When she was telling my uncle about her plans for fixing up the house, she said that she felt like someone kicked her in the shin. And 2 days later, she was in the hospital with a blood clot. No one saw anything. She was just sitting on her front porch. But she convinced herself that it was Daddy telling her that she needed to slow down. We definitely believe that we are watched over by our loved ones. Story 3. Visitor in the Night. I was 18 and 8 months pregnant with our first child. I woke up in the middle of the night and completely froze, with something telling me to move my head to the right, which is the direction my husband was laying, as well as having the crib for our soon-to-be child. There was a woman standing at the end of the bed, right between the crib and our bed. She put a finger up to her mouth, shushing me, and then she touched my husband's face and hair, gazed at the crib. She then proceeded to sit on my bed and cry while staring at the crib. I'm frozen this entire time. And then she just leaves. She goes to the door and leaves. Too scared to talk, I curl up to my husband and I cry myself back to sleep. The next day, I tell him what I experienced the night before. And while describing the woman, he starts to tear up. I ask him what's wrong, and he pulls out a family album. Come to find out, he has an aunt who is rarely discussed. She was murdered by her husband when my husband was 9 years old. He was her favorite when she was alive. Before him and I got together, he always said he never wanted to get married and have kids. My guess is that she just wanted to check in on the situation. It was overcome with emotions about the growing up he had done. I've seen her a few times since, mainly around the house when we are about to have a huge life shift, like buying a house, having our second child, things of that nature. And our interactions have a totally different vibe now. She isn't threatening or intimidating anymore. I'll see her and she'll nod, and I'll nod, and she'll just keep observing things. Our oldest, who is 3 now, always talks about the lady who looks just like Papa. And our youngest, who is 10 months old, is her namesake, is constantly playing with something or someone who isn't there. Overall, it's been pretty cool having a ghost around. Story 4. The Shadows. My grandmother had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's when I was a teenager. After my grandfather died, she just kept getting sicker. My parents decided to move her in with us so that we could keep a closer eye on her. A couple months later, she accidentally fell and broke her hip. My dad rushed her to the hospital. I stayed home with Mom. My grandma used to sit in the same spot all day, a big comfy chair in the middle of the living room. The night my dad rushed her to the hospital, I walked into the living room and saw a shadow, a big black silhouette of a man standing behind the chair. I jumped from fright, and as soon as I took my eyes off of it, it was gone. I thought it was my imagination, so I brushed it off and went back to my room. A couple hours later, I was in my room. My mom was in the living room watching TV when I suddenly heard her scream. I ran to the living room. Her hand was clutching her chest, and she was heaving. Her eyes were nearly bulging out of her head. I asked her if she was okay, and she said, "I could have sworn I saw your father standing behind that chair." My dad and my grandpa, they looked eerily similar. I guess my grandpa was checking in on Grandma and was concerned that she wasn't in her chair. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the stories, hit that subscribe button and give me a thumbs up. I really do appreciate it. Bye!